The mountains didn't forgive mistakes. Ronan Hale had learned that truth the hard way, carved it into his bones over 10 winters of silence and snow. The cabin he called home, if you could call 4 walls and a roof over your head a home, sat wedged into a granite cliff face like a splinter under a fingernail. Stubborn, permanent, unreachable unless you knew the paths, and nobody knew the paths anymore. Nobody wanted to. The town below, nestled in the valley like a tumor in otherwise healthy flesh, had long since decided Ronan Hale was better off forgotten. A ghost story mothers used to scare children into behaving. Stay close to the house, or the mountain man will get you. They'd twisted the truth until it fit their narrative, turned a land dispute into a massacre, self-defense into murder, a man into a monster. Ronan didn't correct them. Monsters didn't need supplies as often as men did, but even monsters had to eat. The trail down was treacherous in late autumn, all loose shale and hidden ice beneath the pine needles. Ronan moved through it like water through cracks, his boots finding purchase where there shouldn't be any. He carried a rifle slung across his back, not because he expected trouble with animals, but because trouble with men was always a possibility. The leather satchel over his shoulder held the last of his silver coins, enough for flour, salt, coffee, ammunition, the essentials. Nothing more. He didn't plan to stay long. The town hadn't changed much in the 6 months since his last visit. Same weathered storefronts leaning into each other like drunks. Same rutted Main Street churned into mud by wagon wheels and horse hooves. Same suspicious stares tracking his movement the moment he crossed into what they considered civilization. Ronan kept his hat low, his expression blank. Eye contact invited conversation, and conversation led to questions he had no interest in answering. The general store smelled like dust and dried meat. The shopkeeper, a nervous man named Fairbanks who'd taken over after his father died, set Ronan's supplies on the counter without a word, his hands shaking just enough to make the coins rattle when Ronan paid. "Anything else?" Fairbanks asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ronan shook his head. He was halfway to the door when the noise started outside. Voices, lots of them, carrying that particular pitch of excitement people got when something ugly was about to happen, and they were glad it wasn't happening to them. Fairbanks went pale. "Oh, hell, I forgot what day it was." Ronan paused, hand on the doorframe. "What day?" "Auction day." Fairbanks wouldn't meet his eyes. They do them quarterly now. Debts, mostly. Sometimes property, sometimes... He trailed off, the sentence dying in his throat like something ashamed of itself. Ronan should have left then. Should have walked straight through that crowd, climbed back up to his mountain, and let the town rot in whatever poison it had chosen to drink. This wasn't his world anymore. These weren't his people. He'd paid his dues in blood and isolation, and he owed them nothing. But he didn't leave. Instead, he stepped out into the street, the supplies heavy in his arms, and stopped dead. The crowd had gathered in the town square, forming a rough half-circle around a wooden platform that looked like it had been hammered together that morning. On the platform stood Mayor Cutler, fat and sweating despite the autumn chill, his waistcoat straining over his gut. Beside him stood a woman Ronan didn't recognize. Mid-50s, maybe, sharp-featured, dressed too well for this town. And in front of them both, standing with her chin up and her hands bound in front of her, was a young woman who looked like she was carved from defiance itself. She couldn't have been more than 22. Dark hair pulled back in a braid that had come half undone, probably from struggling. Eyes that burned green even from this distance, scanning the crowd like she was memorizing faces for later. Her dress was simple, patched in places, but clean. Respectable. The kind of dress a woman wore when she had nothing left but her dignity. They were selling her. The realization hit Ronan like a fist to the gut. "Now, gentlemen," Mayor Cutler was saying, his voice carrying that false joviality people used when they were doing something awful and pretending it was normal. "Miss Eliza Vance here finds herself in unfortunate circumstances. Her father, Thomas Vance, God rest his soul, passed 3 weeks ago leaving considerable debt. Debts that, according to the law, must be satisfied." "What law?" The young woman, Eliza, spat the words like bullets. "Show me the document. Show me where my father signed anything that gives you the right to—" "Quiet, girl." The well-dressed woman spoke without looking at her, examining her fingernails instead. Your father took a loan from the Territorial Bank, $1,500. The contract was clear. Payment in full or collateral seizure. You are the collateral. Margaret Sterling, someone in the crowd whispered. The banker's wife. This is her show. Eliza lunged forward against her bonds. He took that loan to pay for medicine. He was dying. You people came to him when he was desperate, and a man Ronan hadn't noticed before, built like a bear, with a deputy's star pinned crookedly to his vest, grabbed Eliza's shoulder and shoved her back. Not gently. I said quiet. Something old and dangerous stirred in Ronan's chest, something he'd thought he'd buried along with the man he used to be. Now then, Cutler continued, mopping his forehead with a handkerchief, the arrangement is simple. Marriage in exchange for debt satisfaction. The gentleman who claims Miss Vance will assume her father's debt and in return receives, he gestured vaguely at Eliza, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. Receives a human being, Ronan thought, like livestock. Do I hear 500? Cutler asked. Silence. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few men looked interested but wary, like they were doing math in their heads and didn't like the sum. 400? More silence. Eliza stood perfectly still now, her face a mask, but Ronan could see her hands trembling, not from fear, from rage so pure it was practically combustible. 300? Cutler's voice rose, frustration creeping in. Gentlemen, surely. 200, a voice from the back of the crowd. Old man Henderson, who owned the mill. I could use help around the property. She looks strong enough. Eliza's mask cracked. I'll burn your mill to the ground before I... The deputy hit her, open-handed, hard enough to snap her head to the side. Ronan's hands tightened on his supplies. The burlap sack of flour crinkled under his grip. 200, Cutler said quickly, before anyone could object to the violence. I have 200. Do I hear? 250. A younger man this time, mid-30s, with the look of someone who'd inherited money and didn't know what to do with it besides spend it badly. My wife died last winter. House needs a woman's touch. Eliza wiped blood from her split lip with her bound hands. When she spoke, her voice was steady as bedrock. Touch me, and I'll cut it off while you sleep. A few people laughed, nervous and uncertain. Margaret Sterling didn't laugh. She looked at Eliza like she was examining a horse with a bad temperament, deciding whether it was worth breaking or better sent to the knacker's yard. 300, the deputy said suddenly. He wasn't looking at Eliza's face. Final offer. Cutler's relief was visible. 300 from Deputy Morrison. Going once? Ronan didn't remember dropping the supplies, didn't remember pushing through the crowd. One moment he was standing at the edge of everything, an observer, a ghost passing through. The next he was at the front, close enough to see the fingerprint bruises already forming on Eliza's arm where the deputy had grabbed her. 1,500. The words came out of his mouth like they belonged to someone else. The crowd went silent. Not the uncomfortable silence from before, but something deeper. The silence of people who'd just seen something that didn't make sense, like gravity working sideways. Mayor Cutler's mouth opened and closed. I'm sorry, what? Ronan looked at him directly for the first time. Watched the recognition flicker across the mayor's face, followed immediately by fear. I said $1,500. Ronan's voice was rough from disuse, each word scraped out of his throat like gravel. Full debt satisfaction, right now. Margaret Sterling stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. You're Ronan Hale. It wasn't a question. I am. You're not welcome in this town. I'm not asking to stay. Ronan pulled a leather pouch from his coat, heavy with coin, everything he'd saved from 10 years of trapping and selling furs to traders who didn't ask questions. His entire stake, the foundation of the life he'd been slowly, carefully building toward. 1,500. Take it or don't. Sterling's expression shifted, calculation replacing suspicion. The agreement requires marriage, immediate and binding. Fine. You understand what you're purchasing? The word made Ronan's jaw tighten. I'm purchasing her freedom. What she does with it is her concern. For the first time since Ronan had stepped into the square, Eliza spoke. Her voice was quiet, meant only for him, but it carried. Why? Ronan finally looked at her, really looked. Saw the dried blood at the corner
This
of her
story
mouth,
was posted on the
defiance
channel
that
west
hadn't
of
dimmed
Betrayal.
despite everything.
Please do
The
not
way she held
repost
herself
it in
like
any
someone
form.
who'd been beaten down her whole life but never quite managed to stay down. Because nobody should be sold, he said simply. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. Hard to tell. Margaret Sterling snatched the pouch from Ronan's hand, weighing it with practiced efficiency. She loosened the drawstring, examined the coins inside, then nodded curtly to Cutler. It's legitimate. She didn't sound happy about it. The debt is satisfied. Cutler looked like he wanted to object, but the math was simple. 1,500 in hand versus 300 promised by a deputy who probably didn't have it. He deflated. Very well, by the power vested in me as mayor of this territory, I pronounce— Wait, Eliza cut him off. She was looking at Ronan with an expression he couldn't quite read. I don't even know you. No, Ronan agreed. You could be worse than any of them. I could be. Then why should I agree to this? It was a fair question. Ronan didn't have a good answer. Didn't have any answer except the truth, which was that he'd watched her stand on that platform and refuse to break. And something about that had reached through 10 years of ice and touched a part of him he'd thought was dead. Because, he said carefully, I'm giving you a choice. Come with me now, and when we're out of sight of this town, you can leave. Go anywhere you want. I won't stop you. He paused. Or stay here and take your chances with one of them. He didn't gesture at the crowd, didn't need to. The men who'd been bidding on her stood scattered among the others, their faces ranging from disappointed to angry. Eliza studied him for a long moment. Then she held out her bound wrists. Cut these off. The deputy moved forward. Now hold on. Ronan drew his knife so fast the deputy froze mid-step. It was a hunting knife, worn and practical, the blade dark with age and use. He stepped onto the platform and cut through the rope binding Eliza's wrists with one smooth motion. She rubbed her wrists, eyes never leaving his face. What's your name? Ronan Hale. Recognition sparked. She'd heard the stories too then, but instead of fear, he saw something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or calculation. Eliza Vance, she said, though everyone already knew. She turned to face Cutler. Do it. Cutler performed the fastest ceremony in the history of territorial law. No Bible, no vows, just a mumbled declaration that in the eyes of the territory they were legally bound. The whole thing took less than a minute. When it was done, Ronan stepped off the platform. Eliza followed. They'd made it maybe 10 steps before Deputy Morrison called out. Hale! Ronan stopped, didn't turn around. You think you can just walk back into civilized society? You think people have forgotten what you did? Ronan turned slowly. The deputy had his hand resting on his pistol, not quite drawing, but making the threat clear. Behind him, Cutler looked nervous. Margaret Sterling looked calculating. I remember what happened, Morrison continued. The Garrett Ranch. 3 men dead. You claimed self-defense, but there were never any witnesses. Just you and a lot of blood. There were witnesses, Ronan said quietly. The Garretts and their men. They came onto my land, cut my fences, poisoned my well. When I confronted them, they pulled iron first. He paused. They missed. Convenient that they're all dead and can't tell their side. Not convenient, just thorough. Morrison's face reddened. You threatening me? Stating facts. Ronan's hand didn't move toward his rifle. Didn't need to. You pull that pistol, deputy. You better make the first shot count. Because I won't miss, and I don't give second chances. The silence stretched. Nobody in the crowd moved. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Sterling spoke. Let them go, deputy. The debt is satisfied. We have our money. Morrison looked like he wanted to argue, but Sterling's voice carried weight that outranked his badge. He stepped back, hand dropping from his pistol. Ronan turned and kept walking. Eliza fell into step beside him, matching his pace. They didn't run. Running would have invited pursuit. Instead, they walked at a steady pace through the town, past the stores and houses, past the last fence marking the edge of civilization. Only when they were well into the trees did Eliza finally speak. Where are we going? Up. She glanced at the mountain looming above them, its peak still dusted with early snow. How far up? Far enough. That's not an answer. Ronan picked up the pace, his boots finding the hidden trail automatically. It's the only one you're getting until I'm sure nobody's following us. Eliza was quiet for a moment, then, they will follow. Sterling's husband. He owns half the territory. The bank, the land office, the cattle operation. He doesn't like losing. I don't like being sold. Seems we're both having a bad day. He heard her laugh, just a short, sharp bark of sound, but genuine. You really don't know who you just pissed off, do you? Don't care. You should. Richard Sterling doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive. And he definitely doesn't let $1,500 walk away without consequences. Ronan stopped. They were high enough now that the town had disappeared behind the tree line, just a suggestion of smoke from chimneys visible through the pines. He turned to face her. Listen carefully. I meant what I said down there. You want to leave, leave. I'll point you toward the North Trail. 3 days of walking gets you to Fort Harrison. From there you can catch a stage anywhere you want. He paused. But if they're coming after me anyway, and it sounds like they are, you should know what you're walking into isn't going to be safe. Not civilized. Not easy. Eliza crossed her arms. You think I'm afraid of hard work? I think you're smart enough to be afraid of violence. There's a difference between surviving and living. And which one are you doing up there? She nodded toward the mountain. Surviving or living? Ronan didn't answer. Couldn't, really. He wasn't sure he knew anymore. Eliza sighed. Look, I appreciate the dramatic rescue and the noble offer to let me go. But let's be practical. I have no money, no family, no prospects. The town just watched me get sold like furniture, so my reputation there is destroyed. And according to you, Sterling's going to come after me anyway. She met his eyes. So unless you have a better suggestion, I'm coming with you. At least until I figure out a plan that doesn't involve starving to death or getting hunted down. It's not safe, Ronan said again. Nothing's safe. Eliza started walking up the trail. I stopped believing in safe the day my father got sick, and the good people of that town turned their backs on us. At least you're kind of dangerous as honest about it. Ronan watched her go, the strange woman who'd been on an auction block 20 minutes ago and was now hiking up a mountain like she'd been born to it. Her boots were wrong for the terrain, too thin, too worn, and she was already breathing hard from the altitude. She was going to slow him down, complicate everything, maybe get them both killed. He followed her anyway. They climbed for 3 hours before Ronan finally called a halt. The sun was starting to sink behind the western peaks, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Eliza dropped onto a fallen log without ceremony, her face flushed and her hair escaping its braid in wild tangles. Jesus, she gasped. How much further? Another hour, maybe 2 at your pace. She glared at him. My pace is just fine, considering I'm wearing dancing shoes and a dress that's trying to strangle me. Ronan glanced at her feet. The boots she'd called dancing shoes were split along one side, the leather cracked from wear. They wouldn't last a week up here. He shrugged off his pack and pulled out a canteen. Drink, not too much. Eliza took it without argument, gulping down water like she hadn't had any in days. When she lowered the canteen, she was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. The stories make you sound like... She trailed off. Like a monster? Like someone who wouldn't stop to help a stranger. Ronan took the canteen back, capped it. Maybe I am a monster. Maybe I just have different priorities than the ones they tell stories about. Or maybe the stories are bullshit. He didn't confirm or deny. Stories were tools people used to make sense of things they didn't understand. The truth was usually messier, less satisfying. Tell me about Sterling, Ronan said instead. You said he owns half the territory. Eliza's expression darkened. More than half, probably. Richard Sterling came out here 15 years ago with Eastern money and Eastern ambition. Bought the bank first, then started making loans to ranchers and homesteaders. Good terms, low interest. People thought he was generous. She laughed bitterly. He was patient, waited until people were invested, then changed the terms, raised interest, called in loans early, Anyone who couldn't pay lost their land. He's been building an empire piece by piece, and nobody can stop him because he owns
This story
the law.
was posted on the channel
father-
West of Betrayal.
My father was
Please do not repost it in any
Eliza's
form.
voice went flat. He took Sterling's loan to pay for medicine when he got sick. Consumption. The kind that eats you from the inside out slowly. Sterling knew he'd never recover, knew he'd never repay. Probably counted on it. She looked down at her hands. Dad died 3 weeks ago. Sterling came to the house the next day with the contract. Said the debt was mine now. Said I had 30 days to pay or he'd take alternative compensation. The way she said the words made it clear they'd come from Sterling's mouth first. I tried to fight it, tried to find a lawyer, but everyone in this territory either works for Sterling or is too scared to cross him. The auction? His wife's idea, apparently. Thought it would be more efficient. Eliza's hands clenched into fists. They were going to sell me like property, and everyone was just going to watch. Hell, half of them were going to participate. Ronan was quiet for a moment, then, the deputy, Morrison, he seemed particularly interested. Eliza's face went hard. Morrison's been particularly interested since I was 16. My father ran him off our property twice with a shotgun. Now that Dad's gone, she didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. He'll come after us, Ronan said. It wasn't a question. Probably. Morrison's got a mean streak and a badge that makes him think he's untouchable. Plus, you embarrassed him in front of the whole town. Eliza looked up at the darkening sky. How much time do you think we have? Tonight, maybe tomorrow. They'll need to organize, get supplies, figure out the trail. And then? And then we deal with it. Eliza stood up, dusting off her dress. You talk like you've done this before. Being hunted. Once or twice. Did you survive? Ronan looked at her. I'm here, aren't I? That's not the same as living. You said so yourself. She was sharp, this one. Too sharp to miss the contradictions in his words. The careful distance he kept between himself and anything resembling hope. They walked the last 2 hours in silence. The trail got steeper, narrower, until it was barely a suggestion of a path through the rocks and scrub pine. Eliza stumbled more than once, catching herself on trees, biting back what Ronan assumed were curses. But she didn't complain. Didn't ask to rest again. Stubborn, he thought. That would either save her or kill her. The cabin came into view just as full dark fell. It wasn't much. Rough-cut logs, chinked with mud and moss, a stone chimney leaking smoke, shutters that hung crooked on leather hinges. But it was solid, defensible, and most importantly, invisible unless you knew where to look. Eliza stopped dead, staring at it. This is it? This is it. You've lived here for 10 years? 10 winters. She walked closer, examining it the way someone might examine a wound. It's small. One room's all I needed. One room's all you have now, but there's 2 of us. Ronan pushed open the door. Inside was exactly what it looked like from the outside. Sparse, functional, cold. A wooden frame bed in one corner with a pile of furs for warmth. A table and single chair. Shelves holding supplies. A fireplace with the embers of that morning's fire still glowing faintly. No decoration, no comfort, nothing that spoke of life beyond pure survival. Eliza stood in the doorway, taking it all in. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. Where do I sleep? Bed? And you? Floor. Or I can build a second bed frame if you're staying long enough to make it worth the effort. She stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind her. The temperature dropped immediately. The cabin held heat like a sieve. She moved to the fireplace, holding her hands over the dying embers. I need to ask you something, she said without turning around, and I need you to tell me the truth. Ask. Those men they say you killed, the Garretts, did you murder them? Ronan hung his rifle on the pegs by the door, set his pack down, started building up the fire with practiced efficiency. Depends on your definition of murder. I'm asking if they drew first like you claimed, or if you hunted them down. They drew first. Ronan fed kindling into the flames, watching them catch. But I knew they would. I knew what kind of men they were, knew they wouldn't walk away from a confrontation. I still went out there to face them, still made sure I had the advantage of position and surprise. So did they draw first? Yes. Did I engineer a situation where they'd have no choice but to draw? He paused. Also, yes. Eliza turned to look at him. That's a fine line. It's the truth. You wanted truth. Why tell me? You could have lied. Let me think you were some innocent victim. Because I'm not interested in pretending to be something I'm not. Not with you, not with anyone. Ronan straightened, meeting her eyes. You asked why I helped you today. Honest answer? I don't know. Maybe because I saw you standing there refusing to break, and it reminded me of someone I used to be. Maybe because I'm tired of watching people with power crush people without it. Or maybe I just had a bad day and made a stupid choice. He shrugged. Point is, I'm not a hero. I'm not going to save you from whatever's coming. Best I can offer is a place to rest and a fighting chance. Eliza was quiet for a long time, firelight playing across her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. That's more than anyone else has offered me in a long time. She turned back to the fire, and they fell into silence. Ronan found bread and dried meat, divided it evenly between them. They ate without talking, the only sounds the crackle of flames and the wind moving through the pines outside. Later, after Eliza had claimed the bed and fallen into an exhausted sleep, Ronan sat by the fire and watched the shadows on the wall. He'd told her the truth about the Garretts. What he hadn't told her was that killing them had broken something inside him, something that had never quite healed. That the man who'd walked away from that confrontation wasn't the same man who'd walked into it. That every winter since had been about putting as much distance as possible between himself and the capacity for that kind of violence. And now he'd brought that violence right back to his doorstep, invited it in by saving a stranger. Soon men would come. They'd bring guns and authority and the righteous anger of people who believed their money made them gods. Ronan looked over at Eliza, curled up under the furs, her face finally peaceful in sleep. He'd meant what he said. He wasn't a hero, but maybe, just this once, he could be something close enough to matter. The fire burned low. Outside, the mountain kept its secrets, and the darkness waited with the patience of something that knew dawn always came eventually. But so did the hunters. Ronan woke to the sound of someone breaking his firewood. Not chopping, breaking. The sharp crack of green pine being snapped over a knee, followed by muttered cursing that would have made a mule skinner blush. He sat up from where he'd been sleeping on the floor, rifle already in hand before his eyes were fully open. The cabin door stood ajar. Gray dawn light spilled across the threshold, and there, just outside, was Eliza Vance attacking his woodpile, like it had personally wronged her. She'd changed out of the auction dress into something she must have found in his storage chest, an old work shirt that hung to her knees and a pair of canvas pants she'd cinched tight with rope. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, tangled from sleep, and her face was set in an expression of pure determination as she tried to break another piece of wood. The wood won. She stumbled back, nearly fell, caught herself. "What are you doing?" Ronan asked from the doorway. Eliza whirled around, startled. "Making myself useful. Isn't that what people do? Earn their keep?" "By destroying my firewood. I was trying to chop it. There's a difference." She gestured at the axe lying 20 feet away in the dirt. "That thing's heavier than it looks, and the handle's slippery, and I nearly took my own foot off, so I switched to breaking instead." Ronan stepped out into the cold morning air, bare feet on frozen ground. He picked up the axe, tested the edge with his thumb, still sharp. He'd maintained it well over the years. It was one of the few things he'd brought with him from before, from the life that had ended in blood and isolation. "You ever split wood before?" he asked. "No, but I'm not useless. I can learn." "Didn't say you were useless." "You didn't have to." Eliza crossed her arms. "I saw your face last night, saw you looking at this place and doing the math. One cabin, one person's worth of supplies, one extra mouth to feed. I'm not stupid, Ronan. I know I'm a complication you didn't ask for. You're a person who got dealt a bad hand. That's different." "Is it?" She met his eyes. "Because from where I'm standing, I'm a liability. I can't hunt, can't track, don't know the first thing about surviving up here. All I can do is—" She stopped, frustration cracking her voice. "I don't know what I can do." But I'm not going to sit inside and be helpless while you do everything, so teach me, or let me fail, but don't expect me to be dead weight. Ronan studied her. The borrowed clothes hung wrong on her frame, too big in all the wrong places, but she
This
stood
story
like someone
was
who made a
posted on the
decision
channel
and
west
planned to
of
see it
Betrayal.
through.
Please do not
Stubborn
repost
didn't
it
even
in any
begin to
form.
cover it. He walked over to a clear section of ground, positioned a piece of wood on the stump he used for splitting. First lesson, it's not about strength. It's about angles and follow-through. Eliza moved closer, watching. You grip here and here, Ronan demonstrated, hands spaced evenly on the handle. Feet shoulder width. The wood does half the work if you let it. You're just guiding the blade to where the grain's already weak. He lifted the axe, brought it down in one smooth motion. The wood split clean down the middle, both pieces flying sideways. See? Simple. You made that look simple. There's a difference. Ronan handed her the axe. Your turn. Eliza took it, hefted the weight. Her first swing was tentative, pulling up at the last second. The blade bounced off the wood harmlessly. Again. Second swing, better. The axe bit into the wood but didn't split it. Don't think, just do. Third swing. The wood split, not clean, but functional. Eliza stared at the two pieces like she'd just performed magic. I did it. You did it. She looked up at him, something like triumph in her expression. What's next? They spent the morning working. Ronan showed her how to split enough wood to keep the fire going, how to stack it so it would dry properly, how to tell good wood from bad. She was clumsy at first, all wrong angles and wasted motion, but she learned fast. Didn't complain when the blisters started forming on her palms, just wrapped them in strips of cloth and kept going. Around noon, Ronan called a break. They ate cold venison from yesterday and drank water from the spring that fed down from higher up the mountain. Eliza sat on the stump, rotating her shoulders, wincing. You'll be sore tomorrow, Ronan said. I'm sore now. Tomorrow will be worse. She laughed, just a short huff of air, but genuine. You really know how to encourage a person. Encouragement's lying about what's coming. I don't lie. No, Eliza said quietly. I don't think you do. They fell into silence. The mountain was quiet this time of day, just wind through the pines and the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. Peaceful, if you ignored the fact that somewhere down below, men were probably organizing to come kill them. How long do we have? Eliza asked, reading his thoughts. Day. Maybe 2 if they're cautious. And when they come? Ronan looked at the trail leading down, the only approach that didn't require climbing equipment. When they come, we'll be ready. That's not a plan. It's the beginning of one. Eliza stood up, moved to where she could see the valley spread out below. From up here, the town was barely visible, just a smudge of smoke and distant buildings. They'll bring Morrison, probably a few deputies, maybe some of Sterling's ranch hands, men who know how to track, how to shoot. How many? 4, maybe 6. Sterling won't commit more than that. He'll want this quiet. Can't have people knowing he's sending hired guns after a woman he already sold. Ronan did the math. 6 men against 2, one of whom had never held a rifle in her life. The odds weren't good. But odds never were when you were defending high ground against determined attackers. Can you shoot? He asked. I can pull a trigger. Hitting what I'm aiming at is another story. We'll fix that. He went inside, came back with his old Winchester and a box of cartridges. The rifle was well-maintained, oiled, and clean, but it had seen use, lots of it. Eliza took it like she was handling a snake. I know. That's why we're doing this now instead of when people are shooting back. He spent the next hour teaching her the basics, how to load, how to sight, how to control her breathing before the shot. She was terrible at first, flinching before every trigger pull, jerking the barrel at the last second. But slowly, gradually, she started to understand the rhythm of it. By the time the sun started its descent toward the western peaks, she'd managed to hit the tree he'd marked 3 times out of 10. Not good, but better than nothing. You're thinking too much, Ronan said after her latest miss, trying to force the shot. I'm trying not to waste ammunition. Ammunition's replaceable. Bad habits aren't. Stop treating the rifle like it's going to hurt you. Respect it, don't fear it. Eliza lowered the Winchester, looked at him. That how you think about violence? Respect it, but don't fear it. The question caught him off guard. Where'd that come from? You move like someone who's been in fights, real ones, not barroom scuffles. But you don't seem angry about it. Don't seem like you enjoy it either. Just, she searched for the word. Resigned, like it's something you know how to do well, but wish you didn't have to do at all. Ronan was quiet for a moment. Nobody had ever put it quite like that before, but she wasn't wrong. Violence is a tool, he said finally, like an axe or a rifle. Useful when necessary, dangerous when misused. I learned how to use it because I had to. Learned the hard way that hesitation gets you killed and anger makes you sloppy. He paused. But I also learned that every time you use it, you give up something, little piece of yourself. After a while, you look in the mirror and the person looking back isn't who you remember. Is that what happened to you up here all those years? Part of it? What's the other part? Ronan took the rifle from her, started cleaning it. The other part is that people need monsters sometimes. Someone to blame for their problems, someone to fear so they can feel safe by comparison. I gave them that, easier than fighting to make them understand the truth. Eliza sat down on a rock, watching him work. The truth being? That the Garretts weren't innocent victims. That they came after me because I had good land and they wanted it. That Sterling probably put them up to it in the first place, promised them a cut if they could run me off. Ronan's hands moved automatically, wiping down the barrel, checking the action. But that version's complicated, doesn't fit into a neat story, so they simplified it. Made me the villain, made the Garretts martyrs, and moved on. You could have left, gone somewhere new. Could have. He snapped the rifle back together, worked the lever. Didn't want to. Why not? Ronan looked up at the cabin, the mountain rising behind it. Because this is mine. Bought it legal, worked it honest, defended it when I had to. I'm not running because people decided I should. Not then, not now. Something shifted in Eliza's expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. You know, she said, when Morrison hit me yesterday right before you stepped up, I made a promise to myself, said I'd never let anyone make me feel that powerless again. She stood up, held out her hand for the rifle. So teach me. For real. Not just enough to scare them off. Enough to fight back. Ronan handed over the Winchester. It's going to be hard. Good. Nothing worth doing ever isn't. They practiced until the light failed and Eliza's shoulder was bruised from the recoil. She hit the target 6 times out of 10 on her last round, and Ronan saw something in her stance that hadn't been there that morning. Confidence. Not the false kind people wore like armor, but the real thing. The kind that came from doing hard things and surviving them. That night they ate better. Ronan had set snares that morning and they'd caught 2 rabbits. He showed Eliza how to skin and clean them, how to cook them over the fire so the meat stayed tender. She watched everything, asked questions, committed it all to memory like she was cramming for a test she couldn't afford to fail. How'd you learn all this? She asked, tearing into a rabbit leg. My father. He was a trapper before he settled. Used to take me into the mountains for weeks at a time, teaching me everything he knew. Ronan stared into the fire. He always said a man who couldn't live off the land wasn't really free, just renting his life from people who controlled the supplies. He's still alive? No, consumption took him, same as your father. I was 19. I'm sorry. Don't be. He lived how he wanted, died in his own bed. That's more than most get. Eliza was quiet for a while. Then, my father wasn't a good man. Not really. He gambled, drank too much, made promises he couldn't keep. But when my mother died, he tried. Gave up the cards, got a job at the mill, actually showed up sober most days. She smiled sadly. Wasn't enough to keep the wolves from the door, but it was something. More than nothing. That's all any of us can do. Try to be better than we were. You think people can change? Really change? Ronan considered the question. I think people can choose different paths, whether that's change or just direction, I don't know. But I know staying the same when everything around you is shifting is its own kind of death. Heavy thoughts for dinner conversation. You asked. She laughed. I did, didn't I? They finished eating. Eliza cleaned the bones into the fire while Ronan secured the cabin for the night. He checked the shutters, made sure the rifle was loaded and within reach, listened to the sounds outside for anything out of place. "You really think they'll come tonight?" Eliza asked, crawling under the furs. "No, but I didn't think I'd be teaching someone to
This
shoot
story
today
was
either.
posted on the
Plans
channel
change.
west of Betrayal.
That your way of saying
Please do not
expect
repost
the
it in
unexpected?
any form.
That's my way of saying stay ready." Eliza settled in, her breathing already starting to even out. But before she fell asleep completely, she spoke one more time. "Ronan? Yeah? Thank you for yesterday, for today, for not treating me like I'm something that needs protecting instead of someone who can learn to protect herself." Ronan didn't answer, didn't know what to say to that, so he just fed another log into the fire and listened to her breathing slow into sleep. Outside, the mountain kept watch, and somewhere down below, in a valley that felt like another world entirely, men were making their own plans, drawing their own lines, preparing for violence that felt inevitable now, like a storm building on the horizon. Ronan sat by the fire long after Eliza slept, rifle across his knees, thinking about choices and consequences, about the moment he'd stepped into that town square and changed both their lives with a handful of words and a leather pouch full of coins. He told himself it was about doing the right thing, about not letting someone be sold like property. But sitting here in the dark, he could admit the truth was more complicated than that. He'd been alone for 10 years. 10 years of silence and solitude, of convincing himself he preferred it that way. That people were just complications, dangers, reminders of everything he'd lost. And then Eliza Vance had stood on that platform with blood on her lip and fire in her eyes, and something inside him had cracked wide open. Some part of him that had been frozen had suddenly thawed, and before he could think it through or talk himself out of it, he'd committed himself to another person's survival. Stupid, reckless, dangerous, but maybe necessary. Maybe after 10 years of just surviving, he'd needed someone to remind him what living looked like. Even if that someone was a stubborn woman who broke firewood instead of chopping it and asked questions that cut too close to truths he'd rather leave buried. The fire burned low. Ronan added more wood, then finally stretched out on the floor and closed his eyes. He dreamed of the valley, of men on horseback riding up the mountain trail with rifles and ropes, of Eliza standing in the cabin doorway with the Winchester in her hands, her face set in that same expression of defiance she'd worn on the auction block, of blood on snow and choices that couldn't be taken back. He woke before dawn to frost on the windows and the sound of Eliza already moving around, trying to rebuild the fire without waking him. She was terrible at it, all smoke and no flame, but she was trying. "Here," he said, making her jump. "You're smothering it. Fire needs air." "I know that, in theory." "Theory and practice are different animals." He showed her again how to build the kindling structure, how to nurse the flame without killing it. This time it caught, small but steady. "There. See?" Eliza sat back on her heels, watching the flames grow. "How many things are there to learn up here?" "More than can be taught in a lifetime." "That's not encouraging." "You want encouragement or you want truth?" "Both would be nice occasionally." Ronan almost smiled. "You're doing better than most would. City people come up here. They usually last 3 days before they're begging to leave." "I'm not city people." "No, you're not." They ate a quick breakfast of cornmeal mush and yesterday's coffee reheated over the fire. Not much, but enough. Ronan was calculating supplies in his head, running numbers. With 2 people, his stores would last maybe 6 weeks if they were careful. After that, they'd need to hunt more, trap more, maybe even make a supply run to one of the trading posts further north, assuming they survived the next few days. "What are you thinking?" Eliza asked. "Long-term planning. You think there's going to be a long term?" "I think we should prepare for one just in case." Eliza nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Today? We set up the perimeter, make sure we know when they're coming before they know we know." "That's a lot of knowing." "It's the difference between an ambush and a fair fight. I prefer ambushes." I thought you said violence was a tool." "It is, and like any tool, it works better when you use it smart instead of hard." Ronan led her around the cabin's perimeter, showing her the approaches, the blind spots, the places where an attacker would have cover and where they'd be exposed. He rigged simple alarms, string across the trail tied to metal pans that would clatter if disturbed. Nothing fancy, but effective. You've done this before, Eliza observed, once or twice. The Garretts? And others. Territory like this, you learn to protect what's yours or you lose it. Did you ever lose? Ronan paused in his work, looking at her. Once, but not the way you're thinking. What way am I thinking? That I lost a fight. I didn't. I lost my willingness to keep fighting. Realized that every battle won was just setting up the next one, and the next one after that. Got tired of the cycle. He tied off the last string, tested the tension. That's when I came up here. Figured if I was far enough away, the cycle would stop. Did it? For 10 years, yeah. And now? Now the cycle found me anyway. Or I found it. Same difference. They finished the perimeter work by midday. Ronan felt better having the alarms in place, but he knew they were only early warning. When Morrison and whoever he brought came up that trail, alarms wouldn't stop them. Only bullets would do that. Or surrender. But Ronan had stopped surrendering a long time ago. They spent the afternoon on more shooting practice. Eliza was getting better, her groupings tighter, her stance more stable. She still flinched occasionally, still jerked the trigger instead of squeezing, but she was learning. What happens if I freeze, Vakes? She asked after a particularly bad shot. When they come, when it's real, what happens if I can't pull the trigger? Ronan lowered his rifle. You might. First time's always the hardest. Your brain knows what you're about to do, tries to stop you. And then if I freeze and you're counting on me, and then I'll handle it. That's why we're training, so you have muscle memory to fall back on when your brain's screaming at you to run. He met her eyes. But I don't think you're going to freeze. How do you know? Because freezing is what people do when they're surprised by violence. You're not going to be surprised. You're going to be ready. And when they come, you're going to remember why you're fighting. Which is? Because they tried to sell you. Because they hit you. Because they think you're something they can own or control or dispose of. Ronan's voice went quiet. You don't fight for me, Eliza. You don't fight for some grand principle. You fight because you refuse to go back to being powerless. That's enough. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she raised the rifle again, sighted down the barrel, and fired. The can she'd been aiming at spun off the stump, direct hit. Again, Ronan said. She hit the next 3 shots in a row. That night, they were both quiet, the weight of what was coming settling over them like fog. Eliza sat by the fire, cleaning the Winchester with the care of someone who'd learned to respect the tool. Ronan stood at the window, watching the trail below through a crack in the shutters. Do you ever regret it? Eliza asked suddenly. Stepping up in that square? Ronan thought about lying, thought about saying no, that he'd do it again, that saving her was worth whatever came next. But she'd asked for truth. I regret the timing, he said. Regret that I didn't have more time to prepare. But the choice itself? No. I don't regret that. Even if it gets you killed? Everyone dies eventually. At least this way I'll die for something that mattered. Eliza set down the rifle. You know what the worst part is? I'm not even sure I'm worth it. Worth you risking everything. Worth all this trouble. That's not your call to make. Isn't it? I'm the one you're protecting. Ronan turned from the window. You think I did this for you? I did it for me. Because I was tired of watching people with power crush people without it and not doing anything about it. Because 10 years ago, I killed 3 men and then spent a decade convincing myself I was better off alone, that caring about people just led to more death. And maybe that's true. Maybe we're both going to die up here. He paused. But I'd rather die trying to do something right than live another 10 years hiding from what I'm capable of. Eliza stared at him. That's the most I've ever heard you say at once. Don't get used to it. She laughed, small and surprised. Then her expression sobered. If they come tomorrow, when they come and things go bad, I want you to know I don't blame you for any of this. You gave me a choice. That's more than anyone else has done in a long time. You planning on dying tomorrow? No, but I'm also not planning on being stupid about the odds. Smart. Ronan moved away from the window, sat down across from her. You know how to use a knife? For what? Cutting vegetables? For fighting. Eliza's eyebrows rose. You think it'll come to that? I think we should be ready for everything. He pulled a hunting knife from his belt, offered it handle first. Take it. Tomorrow morning I'll show you where to keep it.
This story
how to
was
draw
posted
fast,
on
where
the
to
channel
aim if
west
someone
of
gets too
Betrayal.
close.
Please do not
She took the
repost
knife,
it in any
tested
form.
its weight. This is really happening, isn't it? Yeah, it really is. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's the people who aren't scared who make mistakes. Eliza turned the knife over in her hands, firelight catching on the blade. You scared? Ronan considered lying again, decided against it. Terrified. Of dying? Of getting you killed. The admission hung between them, heavy and true. Eliza set the knife down carefully, like it might break. Don't do that, she said quietly. Don't make this about protecting me. We're in this together now, partners, equals. You've been shooting a rifle for 2 days. And you've been alone for 10 years. Seems like we're both learning new things. Ronan didn't have an answer for that, so he just nodded and went back to watching the trail while Eliza banked the fire for the night. Later, lying on the floor while she slept above him, Ronan thought about the men who would come tomorrow or the day after. Thought about Morrison with his mean streak and his badge. About Sterling's ranch hands, whoever they might be. About the violence that was coming like a storm they couldn't outrun. He told Eliza the truth. He was terrified. But not for himself. For her. For what would happen if he wasn't fast enough, smart enough, good enough to keep her alive through what was coming. 10 years ago, he'd walked away from violence, believing he was done with it. That he could bury that part of himself along with the bodies and start over. But you couldn't outrun what you were. Couldn't hide from the tools you knew how to use just because using them changed you. The mountain was quiet, patient, waiting. And somewhere on the trail below, men were climbing toward them with guns and hate and the absolute certainty that might made right. Ronan closed his eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that when the sun rose, everything would change again. The quiet would shatter. The safety would evaporate. And he and Eliza would find out whether 2 days of preparation was enough to survive what was coming. The alarm went off at dawn. Not the gentle kind of wake-up call, but the violent clatter of metal pans hitting rock echoing through the canyon like gunshots. Ronan was on his feet before the sound fully registered, rifle in hand, moving to the window. Eliza sat up in bed, eyes wide, her hand already reaching for the Winchester propped against the wall. How many? She whispered. Ronan peered through the shutters, scanning the trail below. Movement in the trees, maybe 200 yards down. 4 horses, 5 men on foot spreading out in a loose formation. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. The alarm had killed that option. 5 that I can see. Maybe more holding back. Morrison? Can't tell yet. Too far. Eliza was out of bed now, pulling on the canvas pants and boots Ronan had given her yesterday. Her hand shook slightly as she checked the Winchester's load, but her jaw was set firm. What do we do? Ronan moved away from the window, started gathering supplies. Ammunition boxes, the spare revolver, water canteen. His mind was already running through scenarios, calculating angles and distances and the 100 ways this could go wrong. We don't let them surround us. That's first priority. He handed Eliza a leather bandolier loaded with cartridges. You remember the outcrop I showed you yesterday? The one with the view of the whole approach? The flat rocks about 50 yards east? That's the one. You're going there. Find cover behind the biggest boulder, sight down on the trail. Anyone comes up that path, you make noise. Don't have to hit them, just make them think twice about advancing. What about you? I'll be higher up, flanking position. They're expecting 1 shooter, maybe 2 if they're smart. They're not expecting crossfire from elevation. Eliza's throat worked. And if they get past us, they won't. But if they do, then you run, North Trail, the one I showed you that first day. 3 days to Fort Harrison, remember? I'm not running. Eliza, I said I'm not running. Her voice was hard. We're in this together. You said partners. You don't get to change that now. Ronan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that partnership didn't mean stupidity, that survival meant knowing when to fight and when to flee. But the look in her eyes stopped him. She'd made her choice, same as he had 2 days ago in that town square. All right, he said quietly. Together. But you follow my lead. I say move, you move, I say shoot, you shoot. Understood? Understood. They grabbed what they needed and slipped out the back of the cabin, moving fast through the pre-dawn shadows. The air was cold enough to burn lungs, frost crunching under their boots. Ronan led Eliza to the outcrop, made sure she had good cover and a clear line of sight. Remember, he said, crouching beside her. Breathe, aim, squeeze, just like practice. Just like practice, she repeated. Her voice was steadier now, the initial shock wearing off into something like focus. Ronan squeezed her shoulder once, then moved up the mountain to his own position. A cluster of rocks and scrub pine about 30 feet above the trail, perfect for enfilade fire. He settled in, checked his rifle, and waited. The sun was just starting to touch the eastern peaks when the first man came into view. Not Morrison. This one was younger, maybe mid-20s, wearing ranch hand clothes and carrying a repeating rifle like he knew how to use it. He moved cautiously up the trail, eyes scanning the rocks above. See anything? A voice called from below. Rough, familiar. Morrison. Not yet. Place looks abandoned. Hale's here. I can feel it. Keep moving. 2 more men appeared, spreading out to cover more ground. One of them was definitely Morrison, his deputy star catching the early light. The other was older, weathered, with the look of someone who'd spent his life outdoors. Tracker, probably. Sterling wouldn't have sent amateurs. Ronan sighted down on Morrison, finger resting light on the trigger. 1 shot, and this could all be over. Quick, clean, final. But 1 shot would also bring the others running, and he didn't know where the 5th man was yet. Patience. Wait for them to commit. Morrison stopped about 50 yards from the cabin, studying it. Hale, we know you're up here. Got a warrant for your arrest and the girl's return. Make this easy and nobody has to get hurt. Silence. Just wind through the pines and the distant call of a crow. I'm counting to 10, then we're coming in. Ronan shifted his aim to the tracker, who was moving off the trail, trying to circle around. Smart. Dangerous. He'd have to go first. 1! The tracker disappeared behind a boulder. 2! Morrison started forward, rifle up, using the terrain for cover. 3! The young ranch hand split off right, toward Eliza's position. Ronan's jaw tightened. That was going to be a problem. 4! Where was the 5th man? Ronan scanned the trees, the rocks, couldn't find him. 5! Movement. There, higher up the trail, moving through the trees with a rifle and what looked like a rope. Planning to climb above them, get behind their position. Clever. 6! Ronan made his decision. He couldn't let them surround Eliza. Couldn't let them get close enough to the cabin to use it for cover. Had to break their advance now while they were still spread out and vulnerable. He aimed at Morrison, led him just slightly for movement, and fired. The shot cracked through the morning air like thunder. Morrison dove behind a rock as the bullet spanged off granite inches from his head. Return fire came immediately, 3 rifles opening up at once, bullets whining through the air, chipping bark off trees. There, high right! Morrison's voice, angry now, scared. Ronan rolled left, came up behind different cover, fired twice more. 1 shot missed, the other caught the tracker in the shoulder, spinning him around. The man went down hard, cursing, clutching his arm. Then Eliza opened up from her position. Her first shot went wide, but the second caught the young ranch hand in the leg. He screamed, dropped, tried to crawl back down the trail. Eliza fired again, missed, but it didn't matter. The man was out of the fight, dragging himself away. She's east side, someone yelled. Pin her down! Gunfire shifted, concentrating on Eliza's position. Ronan saw her duck behind the boulder as bullets hammered the rock, sending up sprays of granite dust. She was pinned, couldn't move without exposing herself. Ronan worked the lever on his Winchester, fired 3 quick shots at Morrison's position. The deputy was forced to stay down, giving Eliza breathing room. But the 5th man was still moving up high, trying to get elevation. Eliza, Ronan shouted, flank her above you, 10 o'clock. She twisted, spotted the movement, fired. The bullet went nowhere near the target, but it was enough to make the man hesitate, reconsider his approach. Morrison used the distraction to advance, moving from cover to cover with practiced efficiency. He was good, Ronan had to admit, better than expected. Each move was calculated, purposeful, closing the distance to the cabin. Ronan tracked him, waited for an opening. Morrison broke cover, moving fast across open ground. Ronan led him, squeezed the trigger. Click. Misfire. The cartridge was bad. Morrison made it to the cabin's corner, pressed against the wall.
This story
From
was
there, he had
posted
cover
on the
and a
channel
perfect
west
angle
of
on
the
Eliza's
trail.
position.
Please do not
Ronan
repost
ejected
it
the
in
bad
any
round,
form.
chambered another, but Morrison was already firing, his bullets hammering Eliza's boulder in a steady rhythm. "Give it up, Hale," Morrison shouted between shots. "You're outgunned. Send the girl down and maybe we let you live. How about you come up here and take her yourself?" Ronan put a round through the cabin's shutter, 6 inches from where Morrison was standing. The deputy jerked back. The flanker was moving again, getting closer to Eliza's position. She saw him this time, fired twice. Both shots missed, but forced him to drop behind a fallen tree. She was learning, using the rifle to control space instead of just trying to kill. But they were burning through ammunition fast, and Morrison knew it. He was patient now, content to keep them pinned while his men maneuvered. Classic suppression tactics. Ronan needed to change the dynamic, needed to do something Morrison wouldn't expect. He left his rifle, drew his revolver, and started moving down the mountain. Fast and quiet, using the terrain the way he'd learned over 10 years of living here. Every rock, every tree, every fold in the ground was familiar territory. Morrison was still pinned against the cabin, focused on Eliza's position. The wounded tracker had managed to drag himself behind cover and was reloading one-handed, pain making him clumsy. The ranch hand with the leg wound was still crawling down the trail. That left Morrison and the flanker as active threats. Ronan came at Morrison from an angle the deputy wasn't watching, got within 20 feet before Morrison heard something, started to turn. "Don't," Ronan said quietly, revolver leveled. "Your hand even twitches toward that rifle. I'll put 3 rounds in you before you touch it." Morrison froze. His eyes flicked to Ronan, calculating odds, considering options. "Drop it." "You'll shoot me anyway." "Maybe, but this way you've got a chance. Other way, you're definitely dead." Morrison's jaw worked. Then slowly, carefully, he lowered the rifle to the ground. "Good choice. Now the pistol. 2 fingers, nice and slow." Morrison complied, pulling his revolver from its holster and setting it down. Ronan kicked both weapons away, then called out, "Eliza, I've got Morrison. Tell the others to show themselves or I start making this real personal." Silence for a moment. Then the flanker's voice, wary. "How do we know you won't just shoot us?" "Because if I wanted you dead, you'd already be bleeding. I'm giving you a choice. Walk away now, or we see this through to the end. Your call." More silence. Then the flanker stood up slowly, rifle held high. "I'm out. This ain't worth dying for." The wounded tracker struggled to his feet, still clutching his shoulder. "Me too. Sterling don't pay enough for this." "Smart men. Now get your friend with the busted leg and get off my mountain. You've got 10 minutes before I change my mind." They didn't need to be told twice. The flanker helped the tracker down to where the ranch hand was still crawling, got him to his feet, and the 3 of them started down the trail, fast as they could manage, glancing back every few steps like they expected bullets. When they were out of sight, Ronan turned his attention back to Morrison. "Your turn." Morrison met his eyes. "No fear there, Jeech, just calculation." "You're making a mistake." "I've made lots of mistakes. This probably isn't even in the top 10. Sterling's not going to let this go. You just declared war on the most powerful man in the territory. Sterling declared war when he tried to sell a woman to pay her dead father's debts. I'm just responding. She's property, legal property according to territorial law." Ronan's hand tightened on the revolver. "See, that's the problem with you people. You think law and justice are the same thing. They're not. Law is just what the people with power decide is acceptable. Justice is what's right regardless of who says otherwise." "And you get to decide what's right? Today?" "Yeah, I do." Morrison's expression shifted. "You gonna shoot me?" Ronan considered it. Would be easier that way. One less problem, one less threat. Morrison was the kind of man who'd hold a grudge, who'd come back with more men and more guns until somebody died. But killing a deputy in cold blood was a line Ronan wasn't ready to cross. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "No," he said finally. But you're going to deliver a message for me. You tell Sterling that Eliza Vance is not property. Tell him the debt's paid, the transaction's done, and if he sends anyone else up here, they won't get the option to walk away. Understood? Morrison nodded slowly. I'll tell him, but it won't change anything. He's got the law on his side. Then maybe it's time for new law. Ronan stepped back, gestured with the revolver. Get out of here. And Morrison, next time I see you coming up that trail, I'm not going to be this generous. The deputy gathered his weapons, started down the mountain. He moved stiffly, pride wounded worse than his body. When he was about 50 yards down, he turned back. You know what your problem is, Hale. You think being right makes you safe. It doesn't. It just makes you a target. Then he was gone, disappearing into the trees. Eliza appeared from behind her boulder, Winchester still at ready. Her face was pale, smudged with granite dust, but her hands were steady. Is it over? For now. You could have killed him. Could have. Why didn't you? Ronan started walking back toward the cabin. Because dead deputies bring federal marshals, and federal marshals don't care about local politics. They just care about justice. Real justice, not Sterling's version. Eliza fell into step beside him. You think they'll come back? Absolutely, but not today. Maybe not tomorrow. Sterling's going to have to regroup, think this through. He lost men, lost face. That matters. So what do we do? Ronan stopped at the cabin door, looking down at the valley spread out below. Somewhere down there, Sterling was probably getting the news right now. Probably furious, planning his next move. The smart thing would be to run, get as far from here as possible before the hammer fell. But Ronan was done running. We prepare, he said. And then we go on the offensive. Eliza stared at him. Offensive? Against Sterling? You have a better idea? I was thinking more along the lines of survival, maybe heading north like you suggested. Running won't solve this. Sterling's got reach. He'll find us eventually, and when he does, we'll be on unfamiliar ground fighting an enemy who's had time to prepare. Ronan turned to face her. But if we hit him first, hit him where it hurts, maybe we can end this before it becomes a war of attrition we can't win. Hit him how? We're two people. He's got money, men, connections. He's also got secrets. You said your father took that loan to pay for medicine. You ever see the contract? No, Sterling's wife had it at the auction. Then that's where we start. We find that contract, see what's actually in it. My guess is it's not as legal as they're claiming. Eliza was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, you're talking about going back to town. I'm talking about breaking into Sterling's house and stealing documentation that proves he's been running an illegal loan operation. Big difference. That's insane. Probably, but staying up here waiting for him to gather more men and come at us with everything he's got, that's suicide. Ronan met her eyes. I'm not asking you to come with me. This is my fight now. You can stay here, keep your head down, wait it out. And when you get yourself killed trying to rob the most powerful man in the territory, what happens to me? Same thing that happens if we both stay here and wait for Sterling to win through sheer numbers. The difference is, this way there's a chance. Small, maybe, but a chance. Eliza looked at this cabin, at the mountains rising behind it, at the trail where 5 men had just retreated. When she turned back to Ronan, her expression was set. All right, I'm in. But we do this smart. We plan. We prepare. And if it goes wrong, we have an exit strategy. Agreed. They spent the rest of the day securing the cabin and treating their nerves with strong coffee and the last of the bread. Eliza's hands had finally stopped shaking around midday, though she kept glancing at the trail like she expected Morrison to come charging back up any moment. He won't, Ronan said, reading her thoughts. He's got wounded to tend to and a failure to explain. Sterling's going to want answers before he commits more resources. How long do you think we have? 3 days? Maybe 4? Enough time to rest, plan, and make a move before they regroup. That night they ate venison stew and talked through the plan, or tried to. Every version ended with too many variables, too many ways it could go wrong. The house sits on the north edge of town, Eliza said, sketching a rough map in the dirt by the fire. 2 stories, brick construction. Sterling keeps an office on the ground floor, but I don't know where exactly. Never been inside. Guards? Probably. He's got ranch hands who do double duty as security. How many? I couldn't say. Dogs? 2, big ones. Mastiffs, I think. Ronan frowned. Dogs were a problem. You could sneak past guards, but dogs didn't sleep, and they didn't miss strangers.
This story was posted
We'll
on
need
the
a
channel
distraction,
west
he
of
said.
Betrayal.
Something big
Please
enough
do
to
not
draw attention
repost
away
it
from
in
the
any
house.
form.
Like what? Still working on that part. Eliza erased the map with her boot, started over. There's a social at the town hall this Saturday. Sterling and his wife usually attend. House would be less guarded then. How less? 1 or 2 men instead of 4 or 5. Maybe. Maybe's not a plan. It's better than definitely getting shot breaking in when everyone's home. Ronan conceded the point. Saturday's 5 days away. That's cutting it close. You have a better timeline? No, Saturday it is. They talked through more details, approach routes, exit strategies, what to do if they got caught. The plan was full of holes, but it was better than nothing. Barely. Around midnight, Eliza finally asked the question Ronan had been expecting. What happens if we find the contract and it's legitimate? What if Sterling really does have legal claim? Ronan poked at the fire, sending up sparks. Then we use it anyway. Take it to the territorial governor, the newspapers, anyone who'll listen. Make enough noise that Sterling can't just make us disappear quietly. You think that'll work? I think it's our only play. Sterling's power comes from people being too scared or too bought to challenge him. We show he's vulnerable, show his operations don't stand up to scrutiny. Maybe others start pushing back too. And if they don't? Then we tried. That's more than most people can say. Eliza pulled her knees up to her chest, staring into the flames. I keep thinking about my father, about how he just accepted what Sterling told him, didn't fight, didn't question, just signed the paper and hoped for the best. Your father was sick and desperate. That's when predators strike. He should have fought. Maybe. Or maybe he was trying to protect you the only way he knew how. Sometimes the fight's not in the moment. Sometimes it's in what comes after. That's supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to help you understand that your father did what he could with what he had, just like we're doing now. Eliza was quiet for a long time. Then, thank you. For what? For not telling me it'll be okay. For not pretending this is anything other than what it is. Which is dangerous, probably stupid, and very likely to get us both killed. Ronan almost smiled. But at least we're doing something. At least we're fighting back instead of just accepting that men like Sterling get to do whatever they want because they have money and guns. That's not much of a silver lining. It's the only one we've got. The fire burned down to coals. Eliza eventually went to bed, her breathing evening out into sleep within minutes. Exhaustion did that, pushed you past fear into simple unconsciousness. Ronan sat up longer, running through scenarios. 5 days to Saturday. 5 days to prepare for what would either be the smartest thing they'd ever done or the last mistake they'd ever make. He thought about Morrison's words, about being a target, about Sterling's power and reach and the absolute certainty that men with money didn't lose to people like them. But Morrison was wrong about one thing. Ronan didn't think being right made him safe. He'd given up on safe 10 years ago when he'd pulled a trigger 3 times and watched the Garrett brothers fall. What Ronan believed was simpler than safety. He believed that some things were worth fighting for even when the odds were bad, worth risking everything for, even when the smart money said to walk away. Eliza Vance, standing on that auction block, had been one of those things. Going after Sterling was another. Outside, the mountain settled into its night sounds. The wind through the pines, the creek running somewhere down the slope, the distant call of an owl hunting. Peaceful, if you didn't know better. If you didn't know that in 5 days, everything would change again. Ronan checked his rifle one more time, made sure the ammunition was dry and ready. Then he stretched out on the floor and closed his eyes, knowing that sleep would be hard to come by but necessary all the same. They'd survived the first assault, sent Morrison and his men running with their tails between their legs. But that was just the opening move. The real fight was still coming, and when it did, there wouldn't be any walking away, for either side. Ronan fell into uneasy sleep thinking about contracts and evidence and the difference between legal and just, about Eliza's determination and Morrison's warning and Sterling's inevitable response, about all the ways this could go wrong, and the one narrow path where maybe, just maybe, they could win. The fire died to ash, the cabin went dark, and outside the mountain kept its watch, indifferent to the struggles of the people who lived on its slopes. Tomorrow they'd start preparing in earnest, learning the details, refining the plan, getting ready for Saturday night, and whatever came after. But tonight, for just a few hours, there was only rest. Only the temporary peace that came from surviving one more day. It would have to be enough. Saturday came faster than either of them wanted. The 5 days between Morrison's retreat and the night of the social passed in a blur of preparation and growing tension. Ronan spent hours scouting the town from a distance, memorizing patrol patterns, counting guards, mapping every alley and back street. Eliza practiced lockpicking with tools Ronan fashioned from old wire, her fingers clumsy at first, but gradually learning the feel of tumblers and tension. They didn't talk much about what would happen if they failed. Didn't need to. The possibilities hung over them like storm clouds, obvious and unavoidable. Now, crouched in the shadows behind Sterling's carriage house, while music and laughter drifted from the town hall 3 blocks away, Ronan felt the familiar weight of impending violence settle into his bones. Not the chaotic rush of the gunfight 5 days ago, but something colder, more deliberate. 2 guards, Eliza whispered beside him. One at the front door, one making rounds in back. Ronan nodded. They'd been watching for 20 minutes, confirming what Eliza had predicted. The house was less defended with Sterling and his wife at the social, but not unguarded. The man at the front door was young, bored, smoking a cigarette and watching the empty street. The one in back was older, more alert, carrying a shotgun like he knew what to do with it. Dogs? Ronan asked. Haven't heard them. Maybe they're inside. Or maybe they're waiting for us to get stupid. Eliza's jaw tightened. So what's the play? Ronan studied the house. 2 stories of brick and timber, windows dark except for a single lamp burning in what Eliza had identified as Sterling's office. The back entrance led through a mudroom into the kitchen, then a hallway to the office. 30 seconds if they moved fast. Longer if they had to search. I'll handle the guard in back. You stay here. Watch for the front guard. He starts moving this direction. You signal. How? Ronan handed her 3 small rocks. Throw one against the carriage house wall. I'll hear it. And then what? Then I move faster. Eliza took the rocks, her hand briefly touching his. Be careful. Careful's not usually my strong suit. Try anyway. Ronan slipped away before she could say more, moving through the shadows with the economy of someone who'd spent years learning how to be invisible. The guard in back was following a predictable route. Around the house, pause at the corner to scan the street, circle back. Ronan timed it, waited until the man was at the far corner, then closed the distance. He came up behind the guard, silent as smoke, one hand clamping over the man's mouth while the other pressed the revolver against his spine. Don't move. Don't yell. Just nod if you understand. The guard nodded, eyes wide with fear. Good. Now you're going to set that shotgun down real slow. Then you're going to walk with me to that shed over there and sit down quiet. You do that, you live through tonight. You try anything heroic, you don't. Simple math. Another nod. The guard set down the shotgun with shaking hands, let Ronan guide him to the storage shed. Inside, Ronan used rope to tie him up, gagged him with his own bandana. Sorry about this, Ronan said quietly. Nothing personal. You're just in the wrong place working for the wrong man. He closed the shed door, wedged it shut, and moved to the back entrance. Eliza appeared beside him seconds later, breathing hard. Front guard still at his post. Hasn't moved. Then we've got time. Let's use it. The lock on the back door was simple, the kind meant to keep out drunks and wanderers, not determined intruders. Eliza had it open in under a minute, her hand steadier than Ronan expected. They slipped inside, closing the door softly behind them. The house smelled of tobacco and old money. Thick carpets muffled their footsteps as they moved through the kitchen, past rooms filled with furniture too expensive for normal people to own. Everything was perfectly arranged, perfectly maintained, the kind of place where nothing happened by accident and everything had a price. Sterling's office was exactly where Eliza said it would be. A heavy oak door with brass fixtures, locked but not as well as it should have been. Ronan worked on it while Eliza kept watch, her hand tight on the Winchester. "How long?" she whispered. "Almost there." The lock
This
clicked.
story was posted
Ronan
on the
eased
channel
the door
west of
open,
Betrayal.
wincing at the slight
Please
creak
do not
of hinges.
repost it in any
Inside,
form.
the office was dominated by a massive desk, bookshelves lining the walls, filing cabinets standing like silent sentinels. The lamp they'd seen from outside cast everything in amber light. "Start with the desk," Ronan said. "Look for anything with your father's name or mention of loans. I'll check the cabinets." They worked in tense silence, rifling through drawers and files as quietly as possible. Ronan found ledgers, property deeds, correspondence with territorial officials, all perfectly organized, all perfectly legal on the surface. Nothing that screamed fraud or corruption. "Ronan," Eliza's voice was tight. "Look at this." She was holding a leather portfolio, papers spilling out of it. Contracts, dozens of them, all following the same basic template. Names he recognized, townspeople, ranchers, families that had lived in the territory for generations. And beside each contract, a secondary document, foreclosure notices, property seizures, debt transfers. "He's been doing this for years," Eliza said, her voice shaking with anger. "These people didn't default. He changed the terms after they signed. Look, this one says 5% interest, but this amendment says 15, dated 3 months after the original contract." Ronan took the papers, studying them. "These amendments aren't signed by the borrowers." "Exactly. He's been forging addendums, claiming people agreed to new terms they never saw. Then when they can't pay, he takes everything." "Your father's contract in there?" Eliza shuffled through the stack, pulled out a familiar-looking document. Her hands trembled as she read it. "Here. Thomas Vance, $1,500 at 5%. But look at this." She flipped to the second page. Amendment raising it to 20%, signed and dated a week after Dad died. That's not his signature. That's not even close. Ronan felt cold rage building in his chest. Sterling didn't just prey on your father. He waited until he was dead to forge the documents that would give him legal cover to sell you. "That bastard." Eliza's voice was ice. "That absolute bastard. We need to take all of this, every contract, every amendment. It's evidence." "Evidence of what? Who's going to believe us over Sterling? He owns the sheriff, probably half the territorial court." "Then we go higher. Federal level. Or we take it to the newspapers, let public opinion do what the law won't." Eliza started gathering the papers, shoving them back into the portfolio. "Either way, we need to—" A sound from the hallway. Footsteps. Heavy, purposeful, moving toward the office. Ronan and Eliza froze, eyes meeting. The front guard must have heard something, come to investigate. Or worse, the social had ended early and Sterling was home. "Window," Ronan whispered, pointing to the large pane behind the desk. "It's a 10-foot drop." "Better than a bullet." The footsteps were closer now, right outside the door. Ronan grabbed the portfolio from Eliza, shoved it inside his coat, then moved to the window. Locked. Of course it was locked. He smashed the glass with his revolver butt just as the door burst open. The front guard stood in the doorway, shotgun raised. Young, scared, but committed. His eyes took in the broken window, the open files, Ronan and Eliza caught in the act. "Don't move! Hands where I can see them!" Ronan raised his hand slowly, the portfolio hidden under his coat. Beside him, Eliza did the same, the Winchester still slung over her shoulder.
This story was
"Easy now,"
posted on the
Ronan
channel
said.
west of Betrayal.
"Nobody needs to get hurt
Please
here.
do not repost it
You're
in any
robbing
form.
Mr. Sterling. We're taking evidence of crimes he committed. Big difference." "Shut up! Just stay right there." The guard's voice cracked. He couldn't have been more than 19, probably hired more for show than actual security. The shotgun wavered in his grip. "Listen," Ronan said carefully. "I know you're just doing your job, but that man you work for, he's been stealing from people, forging documents, selling human beings to cover his tracks. Whatever he's paying you, it's not worth defending that." "I said shut up!" The shotgun steadied, finger tightening on the trigger. Eliza moved then, not toward the guard, but sideways, drawing his attention. "You were at the auction, weren't you? I remember you, standing in the back looking uncomfortable." The guard's eyes flicked to her. Yeah, I was there. Did you think that was right, what they did to me? I don't, that's not my business. It became your business the moment you took Sterling's money. Eliza's voice was hard. You watched them try to sell me like livestock and did nothing. Now you're going to shoot us for trying to prove he's a criminal? That who you want to be? The guard's face was anguished. I got a family. I need this job. Then you'll still have it tomorrow. We're not trying to hurt you. We just want these papers. You let us walk out that window. You can tell Sterling you tried to stop us, but we got away. No shame in that. No blood on your hands. He'll fire me. Maybe. But you'll be alive and able to look at yourself in the mirror. Eliza took a step toward the window. What's it going to be? The shotgun trembled. The guard looked at Ronan, at Eliza, at the broken window, making a choice that would define him one way or another. Finally, slowly, he lowered the weapon. Go. Just go. Before I change my mind. Ronan didn't wait. He grabbed Eliza and hauled her through the window, glass crunching under their boots. They hit the ground hard, Eliza stumbling but staying upright. Behind them, the guard appeared in the window, watching them flee into the night. Thank you, Eliza called back. The guard just shook his head and disappeared from view. They ran. Through the alley, across a side street, into the maze of buildings and shadows that made up the town's industrial quarter. Behind them, shouts started up. The alarm had been raised. Men were coming. This way! Ronan veered left, heading for the creek that ran along the town's edge. If they could cross it, get into the trees beyond, they'd have a chance. Gunfire cracked behind them. Not aimed shots, just noise meant to scare or slow them down. It worked. Eliza stumbled, caught herself, kept running. Her breath was ragged, face pale in the moonlight. Almost there, Ronan said. Just a little further. They reached the creek, splashed through water that soaked them to the knees. The far bank was steep, slippery with mud. Ronan climbed first, then reached back to pull Eliza up. She was struggling now, exhaustion catching up with adrenaline. I can't. Need to. Stop. Not yet. Come on. He half-dragged her into the tree line just as their pursuers reached the creek. 4 men, maybe 5, spreading out to cut off escape routes. Morrison's voice rose above the others, angry and commanding. They're in the trees! Fan out! Don't let them reach the mountain! Ronan and Eliza pushed deeper into the forest, moving as fast as the darkness allowed. Branches whipped in their faces, roots tried to trip them, but they kept going. Had to keep going. A bullet spanged off a tree trunk inches from Ronan's head. They're shooting blind, he said. Keep moving. Stay low. But Eliza was fading. Her steps were uneven, her breathing harsh. Whatever reserves she'd been running on were empty now. Ronan, I can't. Yes, you can. Just a little more. No, I'm slowing you down. Take the papers and go. I'll lead them away. Not happening. Ronan, he spun on her, gripping her shoulders. We're in this together, remember? Partners. That doesn't stop being true just because things got hard. Now move. Something in his voice cut through her exhaustion. She nodded, took a breath, started moving again. They climbed for another 20 minutes, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter but never disappearing entirely. Morrison and his men knew the mountain too, maybe not as well as Ronan, but well enough to be dangerous. Finally, Ronan found what he was looking for. A section of the trail where the rock face jutted out, creating a natural overhang with good cover and a clear view of the approach. Defensible, not perfect, but better than running blind in the dark. Here, he said, pulling Eliza into the shelter. We make our stand here. Stand? There's 5 of them, maybe more. And they have to come at us single file up that trail. Evens the odds. Eliza collapsed against the rock, chest heaving. This is insane. You have a better idea. I'm listening. She didn't. Just shook her head and checked her rifle, making sure it hadn't taken damage during the run. Below them, lights appeared, torches, moving through the trees in a loose search pattern. Morrison's voice carried up the mountain, directing his men. They went this way. Keep pushing. Hale knows these trails, but he's got the girl with him. She'll slow him down. Flattering, Eliza muttered. He's not wrong. Thanks. Just being honest. The lights got closer. Ronan counted 4 torches, which meant at least 4 men, maybe more hanging back in reserve. He settled into position.
This story was
rifle
posted
ready,
on the
and
channel
waited.
west of
The
Betrayal.
first man appeared on the
Please do
trail
not
below,
repost it
torch
in any
held
form.
high, peering into the darkness. Not Morrison, someone Ronan didn't recognize. Ranch hand, probably, hired gun doing what he was paid for. Ronan let him pass, then the second man, waiting. Patience was everything now. The third man was Morrison. The deputy moved cautiously, pistol in one hand, torch in the other. He'd learned from their last encounter wasn't taking chances. "Hale," he called out. "We know you're up here. We found the guard you tied up, saw what you stole from Mr. Sterling's office. That's theft, breaking and entering, assault on a peace officer. Give it up now, and maybe you live through this." Ronan didn't answer. Let Morrison's words echo off the rocks, unanswered. "I'm trying to help you. Sterling wants you dead, but the law says you get a trial. Surrender, and I'll take you in proper." "You believe him?" Eliza whispered. "Not even a little bit." Morrison was closer now, maybe 40 yards down the trail. The other men had spread out trying to flank, but the terrain didn't allow for much flanking. The trail was narrow here, steep drop-offs on both sides. "Last chance, Hale!" Ronan stood up, showing himself. Morrison's torch swung toward him, illuminating his position. "You want these papers," Ronan said, pulling the portfolio partway out of his coat. "You're going to have to come take them." Morrison's face twisted. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Seems to me it's exactly as hard as it needs to be. You work for a man who forges documents and sells women. That make you proud? That what you tell yourself when you put on that badge? I enforce the law. You enforce Sterling's will. There's a difference. Give me the damn papers. Come get them." Morrison raised his pistol. So did the other men, weapons appearing from coats and holsters. 4 guns trained on Ronan's position. "You're outnumbered and outgunned," Morrison said. "Think about this." "I am thinking. I'm thinking about how those papers prove Sterling's been running a criminal enterprise for years. I'm thinking about how many families he destroyed, how many lives he ruined. And I'm thinking that even if I die tonight, those papers are going to the territorial governor first thing tomorrow morning." Ronan paused. "Question is, are you willing to kill a man in cold blood to protect Sterling's secrets? Because that's what this is now. Not law enforcement, murder." Morrison's jaw worked. The other men shifted uncomfortably, looking at each other. They'd signed up for a manhunt, not an execution. "He's a thief," Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. "He's a witness," one of the other men said quietly. "If we shoot him now, knowing what we know about those papers—" "Shut up, Davis." "No, I don't think I will." The man called Davis lowered his rifle. "I didn't sign up to be Sterling's executioner. I'm out. You walk away, you don't get paid. Better than hanging for murder when this all comes out." Davis turned and started back down the trail. After a moment, one of the other men followed. Then another, until it was just Morrison and one loyal ranch hand standing in the torchlight, facing Ronan's position. Morrison looked like he wanted to shoot someone, anyone. But the math had changed, 2 against 2, with Ronan holding high ground and evidence that would destroy Sterling. The smart play was retreat, regroup, come back with more men or a better plan. But Morrison had never struck Ronan as particularly smart. The deputy raised his pistol, aiming at Ronan's chest. "You're dead, Hale. One way or another. Tonight or next week doesn't matter. Sterling owns
This
this
story was
territory,
posted
and
on the
you just
channel
signed your
west of
death warrant."
Betrayal. Please
Ronan
do not
lit his eyes.
repost it in any
"Maybe,
form.
but I'm taking him down with me." Morrison's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot that rang out didn't come from his gun. Eliza's rifle cracked from beside Ronan, the bullet catching Morrison's torch and exploding it in a shower of sparks. The deputy jerked back, startled, dropping the torch. It tumbled off the trail, falling into darkness. In the confusion, Ronan fired twice. Not at Morrison, but at the ranch hand beside him. The man dove for cover, return fire going wild. "Go!" Ronan shouted at Eliza. "Now!" They ran again, leaving Morrison and his man stumbling in the dark, cursing and shooting at shadows. The trail was treacherous without light, all loose rock and blind drops, but Ronan knew it by feel, knew every turn, every switchback, every place where the mountain would either hold you up or let you fall. They climbed for an hour until the sounds of pursuit faded completely, and there was nothing but their own breathing and the wind through the pines. Only then did Ronan allow them to stop, both of them collapsing against a boulder. "Did we?" Eliza gasped. "Did we make it?" "For now." "The papers?" Ronan pulled the portfolio from his coat, damp from the creek, crumpled from running, but intact. "Still here." Eliza started laughing. Not happy laughter, but the kind that came from exhaustion and relief, and the sheer absurdity of still being alive. "We actually did it. We robbed Richard Sterling and lived to tell about it." "We're not clear yet. Morrison knows what we have now. Sterling knows. They're going to come at us with everything. So what do we do?" Ronan looked at the portfolio, then at the mountain rising above them. The cabin was another 2 hours of climbing, and dawn was maybe 3 hours away. They'd need rest, food, time to plan their next move. But time was the one thing they didn't have anymore. "We don't go back to the cabin," he said. "It's compromised. They know where it is. They'll be waiting." "Then where?" "North, like I said from the beginning, Fort Harrison. We get these papers to someone who'll actually do something with them. 3 days on foot. 2 if we push hard." Eliza looked at him, her face smudged with dirt and exhaustion, but her eyes still fierce. "You think we can make it?" "I think we're going to try." She nodded once, final and determined. "Then let's go." They started walking again, leaving the trail behind, cutting through wilderness that would slow any pursuit. The mountain was vast, full of places to hide if you knew where to look. And Ronan knew. Behind them, down in the valley, lights were spreading through the town. The alarm had gone out. Men were being mobilized. Sterling's empire was rallying to crush the threat before it could spread. But Ronan and Eliza were already gone, swallowed by the mountain in the darkness, carrying evidence that would either bring down a corrupt power structure or get them both killed trying. The night was cold, the path ahead uncertain, and every step took them further from anything resembling safety. But they were still moving, still fighting, still alive. And that would have to be enough until morning came and the real chase began. They didn't make it 2 miles before Eliza collapsed. Not dramatically, not with warning. One moment she was walking, the next her knees just buckled and she went down hard, catching herself on her hands. Ronan turned back to find her kneeling in the dirt, head down, breathing in sharp gasps. "I'm fine," she said before he could ask. "Just need a minute." "You need more than a minute." "I said I'm fine." But she wasn't. Ronan could see it in the way her hands trembled, the pallor of her skin even in the moonlight. They'd been running on adrenaline and determination for hours, and the human body could only sustain that for so long before it demanded payment. "We'll rest here," he said, scanning the area. They were in a hollow between 2 ridges, sheltered from wind and sight. Not ideal, but better than open ground. "Get some sleep. We'll move again at first light." "Sterling's men won't find us if we're smart, and you're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." Eliza looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She nodded, crawled to the base of a pine tree, and was asleep within minutes. Just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. Ronan kept watch, rifle across his knees, thinking about Morrison and Sterling and the way things had a habit of spiraling beyond control. They had the evidence now. Proof of Sterling's criminal enterprise documented in his own hand. That should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like they'd just painted targets on their backs. He must have dozed off sometime before dawn because he woke to Eliza shaking his shoulder, her face tight with fear. "Riders coming up the South Trail." Ronan was instantly alert, listening. There, the distant sound of horses picking their way through rough terrain. Multiple animals, moving with purpose. "How many?" "Couldn't tell. At least 4, maybe more." Ronan did quick math. They had maybe a 20-minute head start if they moved now. But Eliza was barely rested, and pushing her harder might break something they couldn't fix. "We can't outrun horses," Eliza said, reading his thoughts. "No, but we can go places horses can't." He led her higher, off the established trails and into terrain that got progressively more vertical. Rock faces and narrow ledges, places where you needed hands as much as feet. It was slow going, dangerous in the pre-dawn dimness, but it was ground that would stop anyone on horseback. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Men's voices calling to each other, coordinating. Sterling had brought more than just Morrison this time. He'd brought an army. "There!" a shout from below. "I see them! Up on the rocks!" Gunfire erupted, bullets whining off stone. Too far for accuracy, but close enough to be terrifying. Ronan pulled Eliza behind a boulder, waited for the shooting to stop. "They're trying to pin us," he said. "Force us toward the ridgeline where they can cut us off." So we go a different direction. There is no different direction. Ridge is east, cliff faces west. They're coming from south. Only way is north, which is exactly where they want to push us. Eliza looked at him. Then we don't go where they want. We go where they don't expect. Which is? Down, right through them. Ronan stared at her. That's suicide. So is getting trapped on a ridgeline with no escape. At least this way we're moving, we're choosing. She checked her rifle. You said violence is a tool. Time to use it. She wasn't wrong. The smart play, the safe play, would get them killed just as surely as the reckless one. At least reckless had the element of surprise. All right, Ronan said. But we do this smart, fast and violent. Hit them before they're ready, then keep moving. Don't stop for anything. I'm with you. They worked their way down through the rocks, moving parallel to the trail instead of on it. The shooters were still focused on where they'd been, not where they were. Ronan counted 6 men spread out in a loose line, rifles pointed up at empty boulders. Morrison was there, directing the others. And beside him, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit and clean boots, was Richard Sterling himself. The banker had come to oversee his revenge personally. Flush them out, Sterling was saying. I want those papers destroyed and both of them dead. I don't care how you do it. Ronan and Eliza got within 30 yards before anyone noticed them. A ranch hand glanced their direction, did a double take, opened his mouth to yell. Eliza shot him in the leg. The man went down screaming, and suddenly everything was chaos. Men spinning around trying to acquire targets, shots going wild. Ronan fired twice, deliberately high, forcing them to scatter. Not trying to kill, just trying to break their formation. It worked. The line dissolved into individuals scrambling for cover, and in that confusion, Ronan and Eliza ran straight through the gap they'd created. Stop them! Sterling's voice, high and panicked. Shoot them! Bullets kicked up dirt around their feet, but they were moving too fast, too erratic. Ronan grabbed Eliza's hand and pulled her into the trees, weaving between trunks, using the forest itself as cover. Behind them, Morrison was shouting orders, trying to organize pursuit, but the damage was done. They'd broken through the net, and now it was a race again. Except this time, Ronan wasn't running north toward Fort Harrison. He was running south, back toward town. What are you doing? Eliza gasped. Fort Harrison's the other way. Change of plans. What plans? We're going the wrong direction. Ronan didn't answer, just kept running. Because somewhere in the chaos of the last few minutes, watching Sterling stand there in his expensive suit, ordering men to kill for him, an idea had crystallized. Running wouldn't solve this. Hiding wouldn't solve this. Sterling had too much power, too much reach. He'd find them eventually, or he'd destroy the evidence, or he'd simply outlast them through sheer resources. The only way to win was to make Sterling's power work against him, and there was only one place where that could happen. They ran for an hour, circling wide around Sterling's men, using every trick Ronan knew to mask their trail. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, the sun was fully up and people were starting to emerge for Sunday
This story
services.
was posted on the channel
Ronan,
west of Betrayal.
Eliza said, bent
Please do not
over and
repost
gasping.
it in any form.
What are we doing? Ending this, today, right now. How? He pulled the portfolio from his coat, now battered and mud-stained, but still intact. Sterling wants these papers destroyed because they prove he's a criminal, so we're going to make sure everyone sees them. Everyone? Everyone. The town hall sat in the center of the square, its doors open for morning services. People were filing in, dressed in their Sunday best, looking respectable and civilized. The same people who'd watched Eliza get sold at auction 2 weeks ago and done nothing. Ronan walked straight through those doors with Eliza beside him, both of them filthy and armed and carrying evidence of crimes that touched half the people in that room. The preacher stopped mid-sentence. The congregation turned as one, faces registering shock and fear. "Sorry to interrupt," Ronan said, his voice carrying to the back of the room, "but we've got something you all need to see." "Ronan Hale," someone breathed, "and the Vance girl." "They're wanted criminals," someone else said. "Someone get the sheriff." "The sheriff works for Richard Sterling," Ronan said. "Same as half of you. Same as this whole town has been doing for the better part of 15 years, letting that man steal from you while you looked the other way." He moved to the front of the room, laid the portfolio on the preacher's podium, started pulling out contracts, holding them up. Thomas Vance, 5% interest turned into 20 after he died. Martin Cooper. Lost his ranch when Sterling forged an addendum changing his payment schedule. Sarah Mitchell. 15% interest became 30, no signature, no agreement. He kept pulling papers, kept calling names. Every single one of these is fraud. Every single one is Sterling using his bank to rob you blind while hiding behind legal language. The room was silent now, people staring at the documents with growing horror and recognition. "Some of you are probably in here," Ronan continued. "Some of you probably lost land or property or family members because Sterling decided you were worth more as victims than as customers. And the rest of you watched it happen and did nothing because it was easier to believe the law was on his side than to admit you were all being played. Where's your proof?" a voice called from the back. "Those could be forgeries. They're from Sterling's own office, his own files. You want proof? Look at the signatures. Compare them to the originals if you've got them. Or better yet," Ronan pulled out Eliza's father's contract. "Ask Eliza Vance if this is her father's signature on this amendment dated after he died." Eliza took the paper with shaking hands, looked at it, then at the crowd. "This isn't his writing," she said quietly. "My father signed the original contract, but this amendment? This is fake. And they used it to claim I owed a debt that didn't exist so they could sell me to pay it off." A murmur ran through the crowd. Shock, anger. The beginning of something that might become action if it was fed properly. "That's a lie," the voice came from the doorway. Sterling stood there, flanked by Morrison and 4 armed men. His face was red, his expensive suit torn and dirty from riding. "These two broke into my home, assaulted my guards, and stole private documents. They're criminals trying to justify their crimes." "Then explain the forgeries," Ronan said calmly. "Explain how Thomas Vance signed a document after he was dead. Explain why you've got a file drawer full of contracts with unsigned amendments that just happen to increase your profits." "I don't have to explain anything to you. Morrison, arrest them." The deputy stepped forward but hesitated. The crowd was watching now, evaluating, judging. This wasn't a private confrontation anymore. This was public, and public meant witnesses. "On what charges?" someone in the crowd asked. "Breaking and entering, or telling the truth?" "He's right." Another voice, this one belonging to Old Man Henderson. "Sterling foreclosed on my property 3 years ago, claimed I'd missed payments, but I had receipts showing I was current. He said the receipts must be forgeries." "Same thing happened to my brother," someone else said. "Lost his farm, his livelihood. Sterling said it was legal, said the contract was clear, but we never saw any contract with those terms." The murmur was growing louder now, turning into something that sounded dangerously like a mob. Sterling's face went from red to pale. "These are lies, slander. I've done nothing but provide capital for this community, and this is how you repay me?" "By asking questions," Ronan said. "By demanding to see the documents you used to steal from us? That's repayment? I demand a proper investigation. A real court, not this kangaroo. You'll get your investigation." The new voice came from outside. A man pushed through the crowd, tall and lean, with a marshal's star pinned to his vest. "Territorial Marshal Webb. Got a telegram 3 days ago from the governor's office about possible irregularities in this district's land office. Sounds like I arrived just in time." Sterling's composure cracked. "This is a misunderstanding. If you'll just come to my office, I can show you. I've seen enough." Webb gestured to the papers spread across the podium. "These the documents in question?" "Yes, sir," Ronan said. Webb picked up a contract at random, studied it. His expression darkened. "These are territorial contracts. Modifying them without proper authorization is a federal offense." He looked at Sterling. You're under arrest pending investigation. You can't arrest me. I'm a pillar of this community. I have connections. Had connections. Past tense. Webb nodded to Morrison. Deputy, take Mr. Sterling into custody. Morrison stood frozen, caught between his employer and federal authority. Finally, slowly, he reached for his handcuffs. Sterling backed away. No, this isn't how this works. I own this town. I own all of you. Nobody owns me, Eliza said quietly. She was still holding her father's contract, tears running down her face. Not you, not anyone, not anymore. Sterling looked at her, then at the crowd, then at the marshal closing in. Whatever calculations he was running came up short. He bolted, running for the door. He made it 3 steps before Ronan stuck out his foot. Sterling went down hard, sprawling in the aisle. The marshal was on him instantly, wrestling his arms behind his back, snapping on cuffs. Richard Sterling, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. You have the right to legal counsel, though given what I've seen, you're going to need better lawyers than you can probably afford. They hauled Sterling to his feet. His suit was ruined now, torn and dirty, his face twisted with rage and fear. All the power, all the money, all the control he'd built over 15 years, gone in the span of a morning. This isn't over, he hissed at Ronan. I'll fight this. I'll win. Maybe, Ronan said, but you'll do it from a cell, and everybody will know what you are now. That's something money can't buy back. Webb led Sterling out, Morrison following with his head down. The crowd parted silently, watching the banker who'd controlled their lives get perp-walked through the town square. When they were gone, someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another. Until the whole room was applauding, not for Ronan or Eliza specifically, but for the moment itself, for the fracture in a system they'd thought was unbreakable. Ronan felt Eliza lean against him, exhaustion finally winning. Is it really over? The first part is, there'll be trials, testimony, probably months of legal mess. But yeah, Sterling's done. What happens to us? Marshal Webb appeared in the doorway again. That's a good question. You two broke about 7 laws getting this evidence, breaking and entering, theft, assault. Under normal circumstances, I'd have to arrest you too. Ronan's hand moved toward his rifle. Webb noticed, held up a hand. Under normal circumstances. But given that you exposed a criminal enterprise and that said criminal would have destroyed this evidence if you'd gone through proper channels, he shrugged, I'm inclined to call it citizen's action and look the other way, provided you're willing to testify when the trial comes. We'll testify, Eliza said immediately. Good. Then as far as I'm concerned, you're witnesses, not suspects. Webb tipped his hat. Appreciate what you did here. Not many people have the spine to stand up to power like that. He left. The crowd began to disperse, people clustering in small groups, talking excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. A few came up to Ronan and Eliza, shaking their hands, thanking them, apologizing for not acting sooner. We should have helped you, Henderson said to Eliza. At that auction, we all should have stood up. You're standing up now, she said quietly. That counts for something. Outside, the town was waking to news of Sterling's arrest. People were gathering in the square, talking, arguing, processing. The world was changing, and nobody was quite sure what that meant yet. Ronan and Eliza walked through it all like ghosts, too tired to feel much beyond relief. What now? Eliza asked when they were clear of the crowd. Now you decide.
This story was
You're
posted
free.
on the channel west
Debts
of
paid.
Betrayal.
Sterling's
Please do not
arrested,
repost it in any
contracts
form.
void. You can go anywhere, do anything. What about you? I'll head back to the cabin. It's still mine, still the only place I really know. Eliza was quiet for a long moment. You know, you could stay. Down here, I mean. In town. People see you different now. See you as someone who helped them instead of someone to fear. People's memory is short. Give it a few months and I'll be the crazy mountain man again. Better to just be that from the start. Or, Eliza said carefully, you could stop hiding. Stop letting what happened 10 years ago define you. The Garretts are dead, Sterling's arrested, Morrison's discredited. You don't have to keep punishing yourself. I'm not punishing myself. Aren't you? 10 years alone on a mountain, convincing yourself you're better off isolated? She turned to face him. You saved my life, Ronan, twice. First from that auction, then from Sterling's men. But maybe I saved yours too. Maybe we both needed someone to remind us that being afraid of connection doesn't make you safe. It just makes you alone. Ronan didn't have an answer for that. Didn't know how to explain that isolation had felt like safety for so long that abandoning it felt like stepping off a cliff. But Eliza wasn't done. I'm going to stay, in town. Not because I have to, but because I want to. I'm going to rebuild my father's house, maybe start a business, make a life here. She paused. You could too, if you wanted. Doing what? I don't know, whatever you want. Hunt, trap, sell furs, or teach people how to survive in the mountains, or just exist as someone who isn't defined by his worst day. She smiled slightly. Novel concept, I know. Ronan looked at the town, at the mountain rising behind it, at Eliza standing there with her entire future ahead of her and still choosing to include him in it. He thought about the cabin, about 10 years of silence and snow, about the man he'd been when he fled up there, and the man he might be if he came back down. I need time, he said finally. To think, to figure out who I am if I'm not the exile everyone's afraid of. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. And they stood there for a moment longer, two people who'd been strangers 2 weeks ago and were something else now. Partners. Friends. Maybe more, given time. Then Ronan turned and started walking toward the mountain. Not running, not hiding, just going back to the only home he'd known, to figure out if it was still the home he wanted. Behind him, Eliza watched him go. She didn't call after him, didn't try to convince him to stay. Just let him make his choice the same way he'd let her make hers on that auction block. The mountain trail felt different this time. Familiar, but not comforting. Like visiting a place you'd outgrown without realizing it. 3 days later, Ronan woke in his cabin to the sound of someone chopping wood outside. He grabbed his rifle and stepped out to find Eliza attacking his woodpile with the same determined incompetence she'd shown 2 weeks ago. You're doing it wrong, he said. I know. That's why I came up here, to learn how to do it right. Thought you were staying in town. I am, but town's only 3 hours away. I can visit. She set down the axe, wiping sweat from her forehead. Unless you want me to leave? Ronan looked at her, then at the cabin, then at the valley spread out below. Everything was the same as it had been for 10 years, and everything was different. No, he said quietly. I don't want you to leave. Good, because I brought supplies, real flour, coffee that doesn't taste like dirt, sugar. Figured if I'm going to keep coming up here, we might as well eat like civilized people. We? Eliza met his eyes. Unless you'd rather be alone. Would he? A month ago, the answer would have been automatic. Now Ronan wasn't so sure. Alone had meant safe, but it had also meant empty. Eliza had filled that emptiness with noise and questions and a stubborn refusal to let him hide from himself. You can stay, he said. For now. For now's a start. They spent the morning working. Ronan taught Eliza the right way to split wood, and she taught him that sometimes talking through problems was better than brooding over them in silence. They ate lunch on the porch, looking out at mountains that didn't seem quite as isolating as they used to. Marshall Webb sent word, Eliza said between bites. Trial's set for next month. Sterling's lawyers are trying to get it dismissed, but with all those contracts as evidence, it's not looking good for him. Think he'll be convicted? Webb thinks so. Says the territorial court's taking it seriously. Too many powerful people got burned by Sterling's schemes. They want justice. Justice, Ronan repeated. Funny word. Why? Because I spent 10 years thinking justice was about being right, about defending what was mine, and damn the consequences. But maybe justice is just about choosing to do hard things because they're necessary, even when nobody thanks you for it. Eliza was quiet for a moment. Is that what you did? Choosing me at that auction? Maybe. Or maybe I just got tired of watching and decided to participate for once. Either way, I'm glad you did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching afternoon shadows stretch across the valley. Somewhere down there, Sterling sat in a cell awaiting trial. Morrison had resigned his position, last Eliza heard. The town was still processing everything that had happened, still figuring out what came next. But up here on the mountain, things were simpler. Wood needed splitting, food needed cooking, life needed living, one day at a time. "You know," Eliza said eventually, "you were right about something." "Just one thing?" She smiled. "When you said I didn't fight for you, I fought for myself. For my own freedom." She paused. "But I think maybe you were fighting for yourself too. Not just for me. For the right to stop hiding. To stop letting fear make all your choices." "You get all this from chopping wood?" "I get it from watching you. From seeing someone who spent 10 years convinced he was better off alone. Realize that maybe connection is scarier than isolation, but it's also the only thing that makes any of this worthwhile." Ronan didn't answer. Didn't know how to explain that she was right, that somewhere between the auction block and Sterling's arrest, he'd stopped running from himself and started running toward something he couldn't quite name yet. Maybe that was enough. Maybe you didn't have to have all the answers. Maybe you just had to keep moving forward and trust that the path would reveal itself. "Stay tonight," he said. "It's a long walk back to town." "I was planning on it." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow I go back. Do some work on Dad's house, check in with Webb, see about starting that business I mentioned." She looked at him. "And then maybe I come back up here the day after, if that's all right." "It's all right." They worked through the afternoon, fell into an easy rhythm that came from shared purpose. When night fell, they ate dinner by firelight and talked about the future for the first time since all this started. Not in terms of threats and survival, but in terms of possibilities. Eliza fell asleep in the bed around midnight, exhausted from the hike up. Ronan sat by the fire longer, thinking about choices and consequences. About the man he'd been when he killed the Garretts, and the man he'd become in the years since. About Eliza Vance and the way she'd crashed into his isolated existence and refused to let him stay broken. The mountain was quiet tonight. Peaceful. But it wasn't empty anymore. And maybe that was the real lesson in all of this. That isolation felt like safety, but was actually just another kind of prison. That the only way to really be free was to risk connection, to let someone else see your scars and choose to stay anyway. Ronan added another log to the fire and closed his eyes, listening to Eliza's breathing from across the room. Tomorrow she'd leave. The day after she'd probably come back. And slowly, gradually, the pattern would establish itself until one day Ronan would wake up and realize the cabin wasn't his anymore. It was theirs. The thought should have terrified him. Maybe it would have, a month ago. Now it just felt like the next chapter in a story he'd thought was finished, but was really just beginning. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, carrying with it the scent of coming winter. Changes were coming. For the town, for Sterling, for everyone touched by the events of the past 2 weeks. But here on the mountain, in a cabin that had sheltered one man's isolation for a decade, something else was growing. Something fragile and new, built from shared hardship and mutual respect, and the understanding that sometimes the people who save you are the ones you save right back. Ronan slept that night without nightmares for the first time in 10 years. And when morning came, he woke to find Eliza already up, making coffee that didn't taste like dirt, humming softly to herself like she belonged here. Maybe she did. Maybe they both did. And maybe that was the only justice that really mattered in the end. The chance to choose your own path, to forge your own connections, to build something worth defending with people worth defending it for. The rest was just details.
This story was posted on the